it's Miriam with a Y. I was sent some amazing art panels to test out and wanted to share info about this company with you, especially if you're looking for a way to really increase the value of your work and or create art on substrates that don't sag, that don't warp, and that will outlast flexible things like paper or canvas. Now, these panels are made by a company called Ampersand. They started making panels about 25 years ago to let artists work on substrates that can last and last. Like, I think I read 200 years on their website. Surfaces that are acid-free, archival, and have a patented seal between the surface and the hardboard support. That seal means that we don't need to prep these surfaces in any way to prevent any wood contaminants from the hardboard leaching into our work. That's all been done for us. Ampersand sent me 3 of their many panel types: the museum series clayboard and gesso board, and one of the artist panel types with a smooth finish. The artist panels are also available with a canvas texture or as unprimed basswood. Many panels are available as simply the panel or perfectly cradled like this. Depending on the type, their panels range in sizes from 4 by 4 inches all the way up to 36 by 48 inches for some that are cradled with 2-inch deep sides. They also carry panels for encaustic art, so encaustic board, aqua board, which is ideal for watercolors and gouache and more, pastel board, which has a marble dust-like finish, which gives it a tooth that feels like pastel paper. They also make scratch board, which are white panels coated with black India ink that you can scratch through in order to expose the white and that way sort of make your art. And then you can even later color the white that gets exposed too. And they also carry untreated hardboard if you want to create your own painting surfaces using your own grounds. There is really an option for every painting and drawing style, and even mixed media. A couple of weeks ago, I made an alcohol ink and resin geode with some crystal and glitter embellishments, and I have been itching to make a larger one. This one was done on a 6 by 6 inch ceramic tile. One of the things I loved about this piece was the negative space, so I knew that the next time I made one, I wanted to make it on a white background again. I think this artist panel by Ampersand will be just perfect for this. This particular panel is 9 by 12 inches, 1/8 of an inch thick, very rigid, so I don't have to worry about sagging like I might have to if I worked on a canvas. And it's perfectly level. And compared to a comparably sized ceramic tile, this is much lighter. So I think this will make the perfect substrate for our new geode. So let's make a geode. My plan with this geode is to make more of a sparkly fantasy painting. I'm not going for realism, but a more fun piece. And I'll need a multicolor base for that. I'm lightly sketching some pencil lines to map out where I'll place the bands of colors. It is very easy to write on the panel with the pencil, by the way. The surface is very smooth. For this project, I'm going to use just these 3 primary colors of Pinata Color alcohol ink. I'll use these 3 to create any other colors as needed. On a 4-inch ceramic tile, I've placed 2 or 3 drops of Senorita Magenta, 1 drop of Sunbright Yellow, and 2 drops of Baja Blue. Except for 2 more drops of the blue that I'll add a bit later, the entire painting is going to be made with just this tiny amount of ink. Pinata alcohol ink is especially rich, so a little goes a very long way. I'm going to start the painting using just a small paintbrush to show that it can be done if that's what you have on hand. But I will eventually switch to my preferred tool for something like this, which is a water brush filled with isopropyl alcohol. I'm using 99% alcohol, but 91% will be just fine. People ask sometimes if there's a big difference between the two, and it's really not noticeable. The only reason I have switched to 99% is because I often use Keelty's layering solution, which can only be used with 99%. But for this painting, I could have used either one. The reason I placed my drops of ink on the periphery of the tile is in order to use the middle area as a mixing zone. I started off by mixing a bit of magenta and blue to get a purple. I have to admit to being surprised by how bright the colors were when they dried on this panel. Often when you thin colors and paint on tile or Yupo or pretty much any other substrate I can think of, the colors can appear a bit muted, when they get dry, but this purple is quite bright. I end up lightening it just a touch, though, a bit later. Now, I'm not too concerned about making this area in the middle here perfect because it will get covered up a lot with various types of glitter in part 2 of this project. I really mostly want color here so that if the background shows through the glitter, you don't see a white canvas. Both the purple and the blue surrounding it will get some chunkier translucent glitter later. The next color I wanted was a peachy light color. So I pulled a tiny bit of yellow towards some magenta. Working on a tile is great for easy mixing. But if you do it with a regular brush like I'm doing here now, you'll be adding alcohol frequently in order to keep this makeshift palette wet. Unlike when you're using a palette that has wells that can hold a lot of liquid, on a tile, you don't have the luxury of putting a lot of liquid down. But since my plan was to work with a water brush, I love working on a tile in that situation. What I quickly realized is I really, really love working with this panel because I'm also able to get true pastel colors. I don't know what it is about the surface of this panel, but when inks dry on it, they really dry brighter than I'm used to seeing, especially in this thinned form. I'm getting a real peach, a real pink. You never see a real pink or real baby blue. Usually you see like a thinned magenta or what looks like a watered down red. This pastel effect was very satisfying. But what wasn't satisfying was using this brush. So thinking that I've shown enough what it's like to work with the brush and that it's doable if you have to, I quickly abandon it and take out my water brush because life is just better with it. I use that for the rest of the piece. I kept a bottle of alcohol handy, but never used it really, other than to refill the brush once or twice. This brush is a small one. I always seem to grab this one rather than my longer ones. I don't know. Because the longer ones hold twice the amount of alcohol, but I always seem to grab this little one. I don't know why. This particular brush is a pretty cheap one, So there's no big expense necessary when getting these. They stay damp to mix your ink, and they pick up just enough of that ink to paint with without letting the inks bloom, which for this piece is not what you'd want. I did not want colors blooming here. I wanted to be able to paint straight bands that stayed where I put them. If you want a wetter brush to mix the inks, for example, or you do want something to bloom, all you have to do is squeeze the translucent tube, and alcohol will be released to soak the brush and make it wetter. After some peach bands, I switch over to blues, and I make bands that are both aqua-like, and occasionally I add tiny amounts of magenta to the Baja Blue to get more of a true blue. When I pick up color, I sometimes let just one side of the brush pick up the majority of the color. Now I do that so that when I paint the stripe or band of color, it will have one dark border alongside a bit of a gradient that fades to nothing, so that these stripes kind of get a little bit of dimension, I guess. I continue having fun making pretty bands of color. There was something very meditative about doing this. It took a couple hours to do the whole thing. I let the blue morph into a purpley blue. I go back to an aqua, to pink, etc. And what's interesting about water brushes too is I never have to clean off the brush between colors. And the reason for that is as you paint with a water brush with alcohol ink, you are discharging the color from the brush. So when you go back to the palette, you're doing that to get more color because it's got alcohol feeding the bristles. So the alcohol is sort of pushing the color off the brush. So the beginning of your stroke will be heavy in color and will eventually run out of color. So then you go back and you pick up more color. So if you're, let's say, working with pink and you run out of color and then you're going to go get some blue, well, your brush is already clean and ready to pick up the blue. You don't have to clean between brush strokes. It's pretty awesome. If you're finding this video helpful and want to learn more about alcohol inks and resin and more, click on the subscribe button and make sure to hit the bell afterwards so that you won't miss out on any future projects. After more pink fun, I mix up more purple. I am still working with the original drops of ink. It is really amazing how far they can go. I work on making more defined inner bands to give this more of a geode or agate slice look. But again, I'm not killing myself for realism, more the idea of a geode slice. Now, if you look here with this close-up, you can see how different the colors look on the panel dry than they appear on the tile in the areas that are dry. It was a really unexpected surprise the entire time. Like when I would get a color, I'd be like, wow, it just looks so different than I'm used to when I paint with alcohol inks. After adding 2 more drops of blue ink to my tile and finishing up most of the bands, I start working on the outer edge. When doing a piece like this, even though I'm not necessarily going for realism, I still make sure not to let all the bands be the same width or too perfect. To me, it looks, I don't know, more interesting this way. Do you think so? Let me know in the comments what you think and how you would do it. I decided to add a couple of bullseye patterns toward the periphery, mostly because, why not? And also because it'll give me more places to add sparkle later, which is always a good thing, because you can never have too much sparkle. Then I mixed up some colors for the rough-looking absolute outer edge. Now, of course, I could have pulled out a gold, a burgundy, a brown ink, but I've got all this color on the tile left, so I might as well use that. If you mix all three primary colors, so the magenta, the yellow, the blue, evenly, you'll get a dark brown. If you want it to be more of a burgundy, go a little heavier on the magenta. If you want a gold, add a teeny, minuscule amount of magenta to some yellow. I mean minuscule, because the magenta will take over the yellow. If you mix magenta and yellow and there's a lot of magenta, you get red. But if you add a teeny, itty bitty bit of magenta to the yellow, you'll get a gold, a bright gold. But you can dirty that up a teeny bit with a little bit of blue if you want more sort of a bronzier gold, less yellow. After mixing up what I wanted, I tapped the brush lightly in the colors and along the edge of the painting. My goal was a mottled, grainy, grungy look. Now, with the painting part done, I'll do some quick checking to see if I'm happy with everything. I'll touch up anything if necessary, and then I'll seal this with 2 coats of Kamar varnish. I'll do that so that I can add resin safely to this piece in part 2, after all the glitter and other embellishments. Make sure to tune in and see how this piece gets embellished, how it gets some texture, and it gets its glass-like resin finish. So see you on Saturday morning for that. Till then, let your creative nature shine. See you soon. Bye now.